योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर् गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So in the previous session, we finished looking at the sutra and the bhashya 3.45, which was tato animati pradurbhavah kāyasampat taddharmana vigatascha. So that sutra had said that tataha, from something. So what was that referring to? That tataha was referring to the sutra previous to that, which was 3.44, which talked about bhuta jayaha. So 3.44 was stula swarupa sukshma anvaya arthavatva sanyamat bhuta jayaha. And we saw it in quite some detail. Bhuta is referred to as the 5 elements, the Panchamahabhuta. What is the meaning of Bhuta Jayaha that we had seen that comes after the Sanyama on 5 aspects of the Bhutas? And then the previous Sutra 45 said, once that is attained, that leads to Animadi Siddhis, the Ashta Siddhis, beginning with Anima, and then Kāyasampat, as well as the Dharma Anabhigata of the Bhutas. Now, when going over the details of the previous sutra, the kāyasampat was left. That was not described by Vyasa because he said that will be covered in the subsequent sutra. So today we are at that subsequent sutra, 3.46, which is a sutra with a short bhashya. So we'll take a look. So 3.46 is as follows. rūpalāvaṇyabalavajrasaṃhananatvāni kāyasampat. So what is this kāyasampat referred to in the previous sutra? That is rūpalāvaṇyabalavajrasaṃhananatvā. These are kāyasampat. So rūpa is good looks. So essentially, let's look at the bhashya right away. It's a single line. It says darshaniyaha kantiman atishaya balaha vajrasaṃhananascheti is kāyasampat. So rūpa is darshaniyaha, good looking, worthy of looking at. So that comes from bhuta jaya. Next is lavanya. Lavanya, Vyasa elaborates by saying kantiman. So there is a certain glow, certain dazzling glow that comes from the person, which is referred to as a pearl-like glow. Where it is also said elsewhere that mukta phaleshu chayayaha taralatvam iva antara prativati yadangeshu tadlavanyam yochyate. So it is like the pearl-like glow. Mukta phala means pearl. So the glow that comes, mukta phaleshu chayayaha. So the glow of the pearl that comes in, that kind of a glow is lavanyam, it is said. Then bala and vajrasaṃhananatvā. So bala is atishaya bala. So the ability to carry out things and overcome any obstacles known as bala. And vajrasaṃhananam is vajrasaṃhananatvam vajravat dhrudasammatihi kāyasya samyak abhedyatvam ityarthaha. So it is the hardness like a diamond, so that it cannot be broken, it cannot be shattered. That kind of a constitution of the body. So that is the strength and hardness. So this is known as kāyasampat, the riches or the glories from a bodily point of view. So that essentially is rūpalāvaṇyabalavajrasaṃhananatvāni kāyasampat, Sutra 3.46.
So the Bhuta Jaya, having explained now the effect thereof. Bhuta Jaya means elements which constitute our body and any body. Every body is constituted by Panchamahabhutas. So, yogi's body is also constituted by Panchamahabhutas. But the difference lies between yogi having conquered the Panchamahabhutas. The arrangement of Panchamahabhutas can be different than the mortals for whom the Panchamahabhutas have governance and rule over the embodiment of mortals. So we are under the mercy of Panchamahabhutas, the elements, while in case of a yogi, because of Bhuta Jaya, having conquered, the arrangement of the elements would be different. They would conduct themselves differently because of the yogi who has conquered the elements. While in our case, we are conquered by the elements, and therefore elements can play their games, while in case of a yogi who has this siddhi, it's a different thing. And therefore the sutra says rūpalāvaṇya. As you heard about the rūpa, darshaniyata, lavanya, the kantimatvam. So that's how the body is now formed, the form of the body. The yogi's form of the body will also be of these qualities called rūpa and lavanya, and also balavajrasaṃhananatvāni. Our bodies, we mortals, our bodies are easily getting mutilated by elements. Elements can play havoc, and we all mortals experience how the nature can play havoc on us. While the nature now, the Panchamahabhuta is being conquered by the yogi, that is not the case. And we saw in the previous sutra that elements are under governance, and therefore they do not obstruct the yogi as we are obstructed by the elements or the elemental creation, but that is not the case here. But in case of the body which is being referred to here, the body has that balavajrasaṃhananatvāni. It becomes hard like diamond. So it cannot be devastated, as you heard just now. And that is the kāyasampada. That is the kāyasampat. The kāya means the body. And what is the glory of the body is briefly mentioned in the sutra. Factors are rūpa, lavanya, balavajrasaṃhananatvāni. And you just now heard the explanation on it, how yogi's body can become. And that is because of the Bhuta Jaya. Okay.
So now the three sutras we have seen Bhuta Jaya. Firstly, the Sayyama on 5 aspects of the Bhutas, and then the Siddhis. Now we move on to Indriyas. And if you have seen, when in the second chapter where the Drishyam was mentioned, it says Bhutendriyatmakam. So Bhutas and Indriyas are said to constitute the Drishya. Drishya is whatever is available to the drashta, the seer. So whatever is under the seen category is drishyam, the prakriti and its things that evolve from its transformations, which is referred to as evolutes. So bhutas we have seen. Now we look. The next sutra brings in indriyas. So let's look at 3.47. The sutra is as follows: Grahana Swarupa Asmita Anvaya Arthavatva Sanyamat Indriya Jayah. So if you see, this sutra mirrors the one about Bhuta Jayah. Just like there are 5 aspects of the bhutas, which was Sthula, Swarupa, Sukshma, Anvaya, Arthavatva, Sanyamat, Bhuta Jayah. Similarly, Grahana Swarupa, Asmita, Anvaya, Arthavatva, Sanyamat, Indriya Jayah. So now just like we learned about the bhutas by going over the 5 aspects of them, now we go over the Indriyas, the 5 aspects of them, and the Siddhi known as Indriya Jayah. So what are the 5 aspects? If you look at the sutra, the terms are grahana, the ability to grasp, the grasping. Because the organs, they grasp the world around. So that is known as grahanam. Swarupa, their essential nature. Asmita, the sense of self, the sense of I-ness. Anvaya. So this we will look at. It is similar to that for the bhutas, are what they are constituted of, which is the 3 gunas, sattva, raja, tama. And arthavatva, their purpose, their whole existence and activity is for the purpose of the purusha. So that is arthavatva. So the sanyama on these aspects, one by one, gives the complete sanyama on the indriyas, and the siddhi is known as indriya jayaha. So now let's look at Vyasa's bhashya. He begins by saying, Samanya Visheshatma Shabdadir Grahyaha. So, whatever is in the category of the graspable, whichever can form the object of the senses, so to speak, the object of the indriyas, that is known as grahya. So what are they? Are of the nature of samanya visheshatma. Samanya means certain common aspects, vishesha means certain specific aspects. And we had seen during the sutra on bhuta jaya, where the samanya vishesha samudayaha atra dravyam, it said. Though anything which is graspable is made up of some common aspects and some specific aspects. And sometimes the example is given, like the cowness of the cow is the common aspect that exists in all cows. And each specific cow is different from every other cow. That is the individual aspect. So, samanya visheshatma. And the cow example is a sort of a very normal day-to-day example. And we have gone through sort of detailed, more technical examples as well. So anyway, so samanya visheshatma shabdadi grahyaha. So even the shabda, etc., as we had seen, the tanmatras, there also there was a samanya and vishesha category. And that we had seen in akaradi, which we had seen for the bhutas. So all of these constitute, so I am referring back again and again to the previous sutras just to point out that there is a certain linkage and the context which needs to be carried forward. So samanya visheshatma shabdadi grahyaha are the shabdadi, shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasagandha, they are the shabdadi. So they are the graspable. Teshu indriyanam vrittir grahanam. So what is the grahanam, which is the first pada of the sutra, grahana, swarupa, asmita, etc. First is grahanam. So Vyasa says, Teshu indriyanam vrittihi grahanam. So vritti means various things. In this case, vritti is similar to vyapara, which is functioning, activity. So the indriyas, when they attain their vritti in these grahya aspects of shabda, sparsha, etc., that is known as grahanam. So the grahanam is the act of grasping. So that is the very form of the word grahanam. Is the grahya is the graspable, grahana is the act of grasping. And that is defined as indriyanam teshu vrittihi, the vyapara, the functioning, the activity of the indriyas among the graspable entities, that is known as grahanam. So this is the first aspect of indriyas, on which Sanyama is here mentioned. Now what is this Now more about this grahanam. What is it further? Nacha tat samanya matra grahanakaram. So this grahanam is not about only grasping the common aspects. This is specifically being mentioned because there are specifics which are grasped. Vishesha is also grasped because katham analochitaha sa vishaya vishesha indriyena manasa anuvyavasiyete iti. So essentially it is being said that the only the common aspects, okay, which is the samanya, is not the only aspect or is not the main aspect which forms the grasping, because that common aspect is not grasped by the indriyas. The what comes under the purview of the indriyas is the specifics. It is a specific cow. It is not the common cowness, for example. So if it is not grasped by the indriyas, so that is said as analochitaha. It is not grasped by the indriyas. Then how can that vishaya vishesha, that commonness, which is not grasped by the indriyas, how can it be manasa anuvyavasiyeta? Means by the mind, how can it be grasped or be known? So essentially there is a certain framework which we have to remember, which we have seen earlier. The grasping in the Sankhya Yoga system, etc., it is as though the chitta, it is taking the shape and the form of the object being seen, so to speak, seen or grasped by the indriyas. That leads to a transformation in the chitta as though it is getting the akara, tadakara karita, it is known as. So getting the form of the object being seen, which then gets reflected or echoed in the Purusha, that is known as Paurusha Bodha, which we had seen earlier. So here it is said that if the Indriyas are not, if it is not in the purview of the Indriyas, how can the Samanya Matra or the common aspect become the Grahanakaram or the nature of the grasping? So this is a slight side point that Vyasa is making to sort of establish a certain technical aspect of the Siddhanta. But the thing to note is, what is Grahanam? Grahanam is Teshu Indriyanam Vritti, the functioning activity among the Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, etc., the objects, which is elsewhere said, Grahanam Indriyanam Vishayavimukhi Vrittihi. So when the Indriyas are as though they're facing their objects, Vishayavimukhi Vritti. So when they are looking towards the objects, the Indriyas, the functioning and activity in that condition, that is known as Grahanam. So this is the first of the 5 aspects covered. This is one, Grahanam.
So the first form, the word Grahanam, should be understood in English as something like functional form. And we will see that the 5 cognitive senses have special reference, as it is an illustration here to understand the Indriyas. So the cognitive organs, which are visual organ, auditory organ, gustatory organ, tactile organ, brain, these organs. So usually we understand these as Indriyas, and that is why major description centers around these senses, what we call it in English as senses. But it should be also at the back of the mind that it is reference here is to Indriyas. We have Karma Indriyas, Jnana Indriyas, Manasa Indriyas, Sharira Indriyas. So, in philosophy, we are told that body is made up of indriyas, and therefore all the indriyas have a functional form. So, in order to understand, the example is given here primarily with reference to Shabdadi Vishaya Grahya Vishayas. Shabdadi, Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandha. So these are objects of our cognitive senses, Gnanendriyas. And they have a functional form. And it is also important to take note of the fact here that the reference is to Indriyas and reference is not to Indriya Golakas. So in philosophy, this classification or this clarification is there because by eyes, we refer to our eye as an organ which is by the side of the nose, or at the top of the nose, by the sides of the nose. Now that is Indriya Golaka. The Indriya is something which is the tendency of that particular organ, and we have discussed this earlier. While in English we don't have these words, Indriya and Indriya Golaka. So the Indriyas are being referred to, and these Indriyas grasp the Grahya Vishayas. The Grahya Vishayas are Shabdadi. And when they have interaction with their graspable category, then they have a vritti. There is a modification, and that modification is their function. They do something and something happens to them. So that the vritti, teshu indriyanam vritti grahanam. So grahanam has been described that way. So as neophytes, we have to understand this as a functional form. The senses immediately have a function, or they do a function, or they are in a function the moment they are brought face to face with their objects, such as the form for eyes, a visual for vision organ, or audition to auditory organ. So they have their objects. So when they face their objects or have interaction with the object or intercourse with the object, they have a vritti in them, and that vritti is grahanam. So, as I said, at our level, we should understand this as a functional form. So, it will tell us that functional form of the eyes is not just vision. Eyes have several functional forms. Because when you don't remember something and you are badly needing a memory, you close the eyes tightly. Or if you have worry in your mind, that reflects in the eyes. Eyes change because of your worry, because of your anxiety. And therefore, we have this habit of looking at the eyes of the person to identify the state of the mind of the person. Whether the person is happy or sad or sorrowful or tensed or worried or in anxieties or excited, etc. Excitement, etc. So they have several functional forms. And primary functional form of the visual organ is to have vision, envisionment. So also for the ears, it is audition. So they have major functions, but apart from that, they have other functions too. So functional form is a broader concept, and that is the grahanam. So with the help of Jnanendriyas, we will be trying to understand the functional form of all Indriyas. At later stage, we'll have to understand the functional form of all the Indriyas. There could be Sharirendriyas. Sharirendriyas means we have Pachanendriyas, we have Shvasanendriyas, we have Janadendriyas, and so many Indriyas. We are collocation of Indriyas. Jnana Karmendriya, Sharirendriya, Manasendriya put together. So we are all made up of indriyas. All over our embodiment we have indriyas. And though all these indriyas have a functional form, so for what they are meant in the embodiment is the functional form. Why are the legs meant? Why are the arms and hands meant? So we know that they are prehensory organ, locomotive organs, etc., etc. They have a function. So their functional form, all the indriyas have a functional form, and that is to be understood as Grahanendriya as a broader concept. But to understand, illustration is given here with reference to Chakshurendriya or visual organ. With that we can be understanding. So functional form is the Grahana Rupam of the Indriya. That's the outermost function of it, prominent function of it. Otherwise it has so many other functions as well, but as I just now told you, but we can understand eyes are meant for vision. We don't say eyes are meant for worry. Eyes are meant for memory. But it is interesting to have observation how and where all we use our eyes, where all our eyes have reflex actions, or they are used, or they are coming in, they too participate, etc. So they too participate, partake, get involved, get addressed, keep addressing. So it's an interesting topic to understand what is the functional form of the senses as students of yoga. So that is the Grahana Rupa, the first Rupa, primarily with reference to Grahya. So any vritti due to Grahya in front of the Indriyas, they react, they respond, they participate, they are modified, they are in functional mode, they do something, something happens to them, and that is the Grahana Rupa of the Indriyas. Okay.
Okay, so a little more since we are discussing this. So we said Granam Indriyanam Vishayabhimukhi Vrittihi. And then Vyasa said Nachatat Samanya Matra Grahanakaram Katham Analochitaha Sa Vishaya Vishesha Indriyena Manasa Anuvyavasiyet iti. So and I described what that means in terms of how the act of the Indriyas and then the transformation of the chitta in the form of the object, etc. So elsewhere it has been elaborated saying Vrittihi Alochanam Vishayakara Parinama Visheshaha Chittavadharanabhimana Samshaya Rupat Antakkarananam Asadharana Vritti Chatushkad Vilakshano Darshana Sparshana Nama. So essentially any knowledge or any vritti can be described as a certain transformation of the antakkaranam, which is the chitta, the inner instrument. It is as though it takes the shape and form of the object, which is then reflected in the purusha, and then the complete understanding or the pramana is taking place, or the jnanam takes place. Paurushaya bodha takes place. So then, what is special about this? It is that the indriyas are involved. So even though essentially what is happening, or the vritti, the functioning is of the antakkaranam itself, of the chitta itself. However, it is done with the support of the indriyas. That is the key point in this kind of a grasping, which is grasping through indriyas. So it says yadyapi sopi smaranadi anurodhena antakkaranasya eva. So similar to smriti, smaranam, similar to what is loosely translated as memory. So we have in the sutra that dealt with some smriti, we went into a lot of detail about what smriti is. But even though just like smriti or memory and so on, this is also a transformation of the inner instrument of the chitta, the mind stuff, so to speak. However, tathapi चक्षुरादि उपष्टम्भेनैव भवति इति कृत्वा दर्शनादि चक्षुरादीनाम उच्यते. So even though the actual transformation, the actual activity is of the chitta, even here. However, because it is happening with the support or with the connection of the indriyas, there is a certain relation of the indriyas to these specific vrittis, it is referred to the darshanadi, the seeing, etc. It is said to be the activity of the indriyas, even though the actual activity happens, the actual transformation happens in the chitta. So this is sort of a key point to be understood with respect to the functioning and the grahanam, a key point of the siddhanta or the underlying principle, which of course in the sanyama process is directly realized by the yogi, by the dharana dhyana samadhi. Okay, so that covers the first, which is the grahanam. Next is the swarupa. So Vyasa says, Swarupam punaha prakashatmanaha buddhisatvasya samanya visheshayoho ayuta siddha avayava bheda anugataha samuha dravyam indriyam. So what is Swarupa? Swarupa is the essential form of a certain thing. Its own form. That is Swarupa. So what is the Swarupa of Indriyas? It is said, Prakashatmanaha buddhisattvasya samanya visheshayoho ayuta siddhi avayava bheda anugataha samuha dravyam indriyam. So Indriya is a certain dravya. It is a certain thing, a certain entity. Of what type? Of Prakashatmanaha buddhisattvasya. So the buddhisattva, the buddhi or the chitta in its purest form, without the raja and tama impurities, is of the nature of sattva. Sattva is of the nature of prakasha. Prakasha as something that causes jnana. It is like just like the light enables things being seen. Similarly, here there is the knowledge, the ability to know is coming from prakasha, which is coming from sattva guna. And therefore the buddhi sattva is of the nature prakashatmanaha. It is made up of this prakasha, of this sattva. So of this type of buddhi sattva, samanya visheshayoho ayuta siddha avayava bheda anugata. So of this, we have seen what this is, if you recollect. Ayuta siddha avayava bheda anugata. So we had referred to it as separate but not separable. So the prakasha rupatvam is the samanya, the ability to know or ability to illumine, to cause knowledge. That is the common aspect of the buddhi sattva. And the vishesha is the specific, right? A certain thing allows you to know by making the form available to you. So the eyes, they make the form available to you. The ears, they make the sound available to you. So that is referred to as niyata rupadi vishayatvam. So the prakasha rupatvam is the samanyam. All of them make knowledge available, whereas each has a specific. One of the indriyas makes the form available, another makes the sound available, and so on. So samanya vishesha yoho. So the specific vishesha of that indriya and the ability to cause knowledge, which is the samanya, there ayuta siddha avayava bheda anugata samuha. So this forming a certain relation where these two aspects are in some sense separate, but they are not separable. They always go together. This kind of entity, this kind of a thing, which once again is an aspect of the buddhi sattva. It is made up of buddhi sattva. It has a samanya. It has a vishesha. The samanya and vishesha are forever connected. Such a thing, such a dravya is known as indriyam. So that is the swarupa of the indriya. So this is again elaborated as the so prakashatmanaha buddhi sattvasya samsthana bhedascha indriya rupam ekam dravyam jatam. Tat indriya dravyam tu samanya visheshayoho prakasha samanyasya karnadi rupa vishesha vyuhanasya cha samuha rupam nirantarala avayavavat. So these are inseparable parts of it. So that essentially is the swarupam. Also it is said, ahankaro hi sattva bhagena atmiyena indriyani ajijanat. Means, in the evolution of prakriti, where it's okay, pradhana, then from there comes mahat, then comes ahankara, and so on. So from the sattva aspect of ahankara, ahankaro hi sattva bhagena atmiyena indriyani ajijana. So the ahankara itself, through the sattva aspect of it, the sattva aspect among the sattva rajatama aspects. So from the sattva aspect, it gave rise to indriyas. Ataha yat tatra karanatvam samanyam. So the sattva based functioning of causing knowledge is the common aspect. So the being the instrument that causes knowledge is this samanyam. So yat tatra karanatvam samanyam. Yaccha niyata rupadi vishayatvam. However, the other aspect, which is the one allocated to that specific indriya, that illumines form, illumines sound, etc., that is known as niyata rupadi vishayatvam. That is the visheshaha. So that is the specific aspect. So there is a common aspect, there is a specific aspect. Tad ubayam api prakashatmakam. Both of these are prakashatmakam. Both the common and the specific is made up of the sattva, made up of the prakasha, which means they are of the very nature of bringing about jnanam, bringing about knowledge. So therefore, of the nature of illumining, so to speak. And therefore they are prakashatmakam ityartaha, and that is the swarupa of the indriyas, that is their essential form, which is the second among the five in the sutra. So grahana swarupa, the second one is swarupa, and it is the sanyama on this second aspect, which is part of the sanyama on the indriya. So this is the second of the five parts when we talk about sanyama on indriyas.
So the second form is being mentioned, swarupam, the substantive form, the essential form. And you just have heard, and perhaps for weak commoners and worldly people, these are terse, difficult expressions and mentions. But why is it done? It is done for a specific reason. Because we are trying to understand the substantive form, not the visible form, not the obvious form, not the overt form, not the appearanceable form. Because in worldly dynamics, we are used to get overwhelmed by the appearanceable forms of anything and everything. We don't have inquiry to go into the substantive form of something or essential form of something in the worldly dynamics. We are so practical minded that we don't have to go into swarupam or the substantive form. But here, that is the topic of the sutra, to mention the swarupam, substantive form. So, what is the swarupam or substantive form? Is that we come to know that in cosmological unfoldment, as you just have heard from Buddhi Sattvam, or Vyasa has made it express from Buddhi Sattva, we get Ahankara Tattva, and from Ahankara Tattva we get Indriyas. So this is a little forensic kind of handling that Vyasa has taken up to tell us that the substantive form of the senses it comes from Sattvic Ahankar. Essentially there is Sattvic Ahankar. And you should recall in our cosmological discussion we spoke about the Ahankars, Sattva Rajatama constitution. Different constitutions give different manifestation, give rise to different manifestation, because the whole living, non-living creation, phenomenal, luminal, subtle and gross creation comes from Ahankara Tattva. So, he specifically Vyasa wants to impress that it is coming from Sattvic Ahankara. And therefore, he wants to highlight the position of the Patanjalas that Indriyas are Ahankarika. Why does he have to say this emphatically? Because there are positions in other philosophical systems who posit that Indriyas are Bhautika. In order that is set aside, that view is set aside, Vyasa uses the forensic process to describe and define. So it may not be useful for you and me when we are taking first reading of the Yoga Sutras. But Vyasa takes the care of the very position that Patanjalas are holding, that senses substantively are ahankarika and not bhautika, as some of the other philosophies push it, such as the Advaita Vedanta and Naiyayikas. They have positioned that they are bhautika. They say Indriyas are bhautika. And in order to disprove them, some argumentations are presented here, and that is why it is little terse for the first time readers, because first time readers or we mortals are not used to go to swarupa of anything or essential form of anything, substantive form of anything. We are just concerned with the appearances form, functional form, and the overt form. We do not have inquisitiveness to go beyond what is overt, what is obvious, etc. So that's why we are not in the habit of going to swarupam of something, substantive form of something. But the sutra, which is mentioning the jaya, indriya jaya, it is important to understand this form of the senses, which is substantive. And Vyasa has played his role and has taken responsibility to make the position clear that Indriyas are ahankarika. From sattvic ahankar or sattva profused ahankar, sattva pronounced ahankar, we get the jnanendriyas. It is different matter with karmendriyas. It is different matter with sharirendriyas. Ahankar comes differently in jnanendriya, manasendriya, karmendriya, sharirendriya. However, all those indriyas have origin in ahankara tattva, which of course comes from buddhi sattvam or the mahat tattva, buddhi tattva. So that's why from buddhi tattva, mahat tattva, ahankara tattva, from ahankara tattva comes the senses. While in other positions of philosophy such as Advaita Vedanta and Naiyayikas, from Mahat or Buddhi comes Ahankar, from Ahankar will come Bhuta, Panchamahabhutas, and from Panchamahabhutas the senses. So that's a totally different position. And Vyasa takes responsibility of considering the alternative view and wants to mention emphatically that the Swarupam is Ahankarika, and that too particularly Sattvic Ahankar with reference to Jnanendriyas. And of course it is more Sattvic with reference to Manasendriyas. It is less Sattvic with reference to Karmendriyas. It is less Sattvic with reference to Sharirendriyas. But it is Ahankar. So in order to make a position clear that these are Ahankarika, the Swarupam, the senses, the Indriyas is Ahankarika. He has used the forensic language, which becomes little terse for we and particularly the first time readers. However, Swarupam is to be understood if you have to understand the sutra here, the purport of the sutra. So that is interesting for second form called Swarupam, substantive form. Okay.
The thing to note is that the Swarupa, the essential form of the Indriya, is still Buddhi Sattva. So it is not an physical instrument. It is of the nature of the purest aspect of the Chitta. So it is made up of Buddhi Sattva with a common part and a specific part. The common part being the ability to illumine, the ability to serve as an instrument of knowledge, and the specific part of the Indriya, its specific aspect or function of seeing, hearing, etc. So that is Swarupa. Now we continue with the third one. Tesham trutiyam rupam asmita lakshano hankaraha tasya samanya indriyani visheshaha. Tasya samanyasya indriyani visheshaha. So this is something that we have sort of already touched upon. So the third aspect is asmita lakshanam. Asmita lakshano indriya. So it is of the nature, or there is a aspect of I-ness that is in the very nature of the indriyas, since it has evolved from, or it is generated through the sattvic aspect of ahankara. So that is the tritiyam rupam, the third, which is known as asmita lakshanam in the sutra. Tasya samanyasya indriyani visheshaha. So the asmita lakshana is a samanya. It is a common attribute applicable to all indriyas. And indriyas, each indriya is a vishesha, is a specific. So that is the third. Now we move on to the fourth one. Chaturtham rupam. Vyavasayatmakaha prakashakriya stitishila gunaha tesham indriyani sahankarani parinamaha. So the other aspect of indriyas are, after all, they are constituted of the gunas, the sattva raja tama gunas. Just like anything is in prakriti, or prakriti itself is nothing but the sattva raja tamo gunas together. So that is the anvaya aspect. Now, chaturtham rupam vyavasayatmakaha prakasha kriya sthitishilaha gunaha. So the gunas are, the three gunas are of the nature of prakasha, causing knowledge, illumining; kriya, causing activity; sthiti, causing sort of unchangingness, inertia, as it is known, or it is also referred to as covering the knowledge. So that is the tama aspect. So prakasha, kriya and sthiti, they are the three natures of the three gunas respectively. And here it is said vyavasayatmakaha. Vyavasayatmakaha means, in this context, jnanatmaka rupa of the gunas. So they are the indriyas are the transformation or the jnanatmaka aspect of the gunas. So three gunas in their respective nature, and it is, after all, the indriyas are coming together a certain transformation of the gunas. So the gunas themselves, here it is said vyavasayatmaka or jnanatmaka, and the other is jneyatmaka or a vyavasayatmaka. So the gunas transform themselves either into jnanatmaka, causing knowledge, or jneyatmaka, to be the known category. So the jneyatmaka is something that we have already seen, and that led to the bhutas. So there also we saw the anvaya aspect, where they were also said to be made up of sattva raja tamo guna. But those bhutas, the five elements, are the jneyatmaka. They are in the knowable category. Whereas here it is of the knowing category, and that is the anvaya form of the indriyas. So tesham, and further it is said sahankarani parinamaha. So along with the I-ness, that is the very part of it. So indriyas have I-ness very much as part of it, and therefore in the yogic path, where the control of the senses and so on, as we say in English, the indriya form a big part, because there is the sense of I-ness is very much part of the very nature of the indriyas. So the purification of them leads to a purification of the I-ness as well, and therefore that is something that we have to very strongly recognize as we learn about that in this sutra. In the fifth one, panchamam rupam guneshu yad anugatam purusharthavatvam iti. So because the indriyas are nothing but a certain transformation of the gunas, then the fifth aspect of the indriyas is that guneshu yad anugatam purusharthavatvam. The gunas, in the gunas, there is the very fabric of the gunas, it is for the purusha. So there is a purusharthavatvam is very part of, when we say gunas, the purusharthavatvam is very much part of it. There is the purposefulness, the teleology of it, as is the technical term it is said. The whole activity of Prakriti is for the Purusha. It's for the Bhoga and Apavarga, or the experiences that the Purusha undergoes by virtue of the karma theory and so on. So that purposefulness aspect of the Indriyas, that is known as Arthavatvam. And that is coming again because the Gunas themselves have that purposefulness. So that is the fifth aspect of the indriyas. So we have seen now all the five aspects, which is grahana, swarupa, asmita, anvaya and arthavatva. So all these five we have seen. Now, panchasu eteshu indriya rupeshu yatha kramam संयमः तत्र तत्र जयं कृत्वा पंचरूप जयात् indriyajayah pradurбhavati yoginah. So in these five aspects, yatha kramam, in this sequence, in those aspects of it, the sanyama of that type, it is said. So yatra tatra tatra, in that nature, the once yatha kramam, in that sequence, once the dharana, dhyana, samadhi, which is that triad, is known as sanyama. When that is attained, and then all five are then sanyama on all five aspects is accomplished, then the indriya jaya pradurbhavati, it arises in the yogi. So that siddhi arises after the sanyama on these five aspects have been done in that sequence completely and fully. The siddhi that arises from it is known as indriya jaya. So now the thing to notice is there is so much because we are commonly use the word jitendriya. He said, okay, this person has full control over his senses. He's a jitendriya. Even on Hanuman it is said, Manojavam Marata Tulya Vegam Jitendriyam. We say, okay, Hanuman is a great person because he had full control over his senses. But when we normally say full control over his senses, we don't even understand what that means. And this sutra says the nature of Indriya Jaya, and there is so much involved in it, which includes the understanding of Indriyas from the theoretical aspect and then direct realization on all the five aspects through Sanyama on each of them in a certain order, in a certain sequence. And after that is accomplished to its full extent, then the Siddhi that arises is Indriya Jaya. So these terms that are casually used, there is so much implied behind those terms, which only comes through understanding of understanding of Shastras. And that is still, even through the reading, it is still a peripheral understanding, but much deeper than the common use of the term. The complete understanding can only come from the yogic process. So that is 3.47, the Sutra and the Bhashya.
So the deeper inquiry told us that the Indriyas come from Asmita. Asmita comes from Ahankar. Ahankar comes from Bodhisattva. So cosmological mapping, and we understand from that the origin of the Indriyas. From where do they come? So for essential, the inquiry about the essential, we need to have this inquiry from where does it come? What is the source of it? Not what something is, but from where has it come? So that's how the inquiry commences. If something is experienced or cited, what is this? And then next step is from where has it come? And then why has it come, etc. These are the inquiries which are there to inquisitive mind. So we just now saw that the Sattvic Ahankar, Bodhisattva, Sattvic Ahankar, the Asmita. And now, when it is Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva also has a root. And what is that root? The root is Prakriti. What is Prakriti? Sattva, Raja, Tama gunas. So finally we reach to the causal aspect of it, which is Sattva, Raja, Tama. These gunas constitute differently, and that's the Anvaya Rupa. The penultimate form mentioned in the sutra is Anvaya Rupa. And the Anvaya means Sattva, Raja, Tama guna. Three gunas. They come together and then you have Mahat. They still are there, then you get Ahankar. They are still there, and then you get Bhutendriya Sushti, the creation. So the primeval matter, primeval substance is Sattva, Raja, Tama gunas. And that is even behind the Indriyas. As much as they were behind the Bhutas, which we saw on earlier occasion, the Anvaya was also a form mentioned for bhutas. The same Anvaya form is also behind Indriyas because they come from the Prakriti, and Prakriti means Sattva Rajatama Gunas, Prakasha Kriya Sthiti Gunas, Shilatva in the Gunas. So that is a final cause. And there is another aspect of final cause is Arthavatvam. Teleology, if you recall that subject matter which was discussed, the purpose of the Prakriti is serving the purpose of Purusha, which is Bhogarthata, Apavargarthata. So as I said, what is something and why is something? So these are the terminal points of inquiry. What is something and why this is there? So why this is there is also aspect of the cause of why the Indriyas are there. Not only material cause of the Indriyas, that Sattva-Rajatama Gunas are the material cause of the Indriyas, but why they are there is also part of the terminal point in inquiry. And that is the Arthavatvam. Arthavatvam means Bhogarthata, Apavargarthata, which is why the Prakriti is there. That's the purpose of Prakriti, and therefore that is also a causal factor. So these are two causal factors. One is, as far as the constitution and formation is concerned, materially it is Sattva Rajatama Gunas. But the Prakriti doesn't work without a purpose. So therefore purpose is also that aspect, which is the final form of the Indriyas, that is Bhogarthata and Apavargarthata. So in these forms, Panchasu Eteshu, each one is a locus for Samyama. And the Samyama will be taking place on each of them. And that is how Pancharupa Jaya will be taking place, and that is Indriya Jaya. That's also a point to be noted, that in one stroke you will not understand or realize, the yogi will not realize all the forms. There are Samyamas, Krama, Yatha Kramam, Grahana, Swarupa, Asmita, Anvaya, Arthavatva. So these are the 5 forms which you have considered. And for each of the five forms, there is Samyama, and that is how the process of Samyama on the Pancharupas is there. And therefore, final statement, Panchasu eteshu indriya rupeshu yathakramam samyamaha tatra jayam krutva pancharupa jayat indriya jayaha pradurbhavati yogina. So see how the yogi is getting the stage-by-stage process for Indriya Jaya to actualize. And then, of course, Indriya Jaya is a glorious, glorious siddhi, which we will come to know when we proceed to the next and following sutras. The point is, these are the 5 forms of the Indriyas, which are subject matter for Samadhi, subject matter for Samyama. And Samyama will give that consequence of Indriya Jaya. Okay.
Okay. So we'll stop for today. Let's recite the shlokas on Guruji and end the session. Vaijñānikam pravaktrutva āsaneshu kalavidam yogābhyāse ca tattvajñam vandeham sundaram gurum yoga vriksho hi lokesmin yat preranena vardhitah yogacharya guro tubhyam sundaraya namo namaha. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.